Saw went over your police take on stream. What was his opinion on it? Did he agree or not? No. Of course not. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that half agree. I think there's a lot of people that probably half agree on that stuff, but to me, like, whenever somebody gets pissed off about something that I say like that, I don't think that there was anything unreasonable that I said. I think you have to remember that, like, police officers are also civilians, you know, even though sometimes they don't act like it. They're also civilians, you know, these are people who go to the same stores as you. It's not like they're military, they're not like a foreign, like a foreign entity. It's just these are people that are, you know, just in the community, right? And so, you know, it's just their job as they work as police officers. And I think that it's unhealthy and not really good for society for people to try to, like, escalate tensions between police officers and, like, average people. I don't find it to be healthy. I also don't really find it to be productive. Like, I don't see how, like, for example, like, escalating tensions with, like, police officers is helpful to anybody. I don't think it makes anybody better off. Cops escalate tensions, though? Well, I think they do. You're absolutely right that they do. And it's what I'm saying is that there's oftentimes it takes two to tango, right? Where, like, so you have a cop that does something really stupid, and you watch the clip, and it's like the person is, like, resisting arrest or being belligerent or, like, obnoxious or something like that. And does this mean that the cop is justified in doing this? No. But it's understandable, right? And what I'm saying is that there's a lot of people that want to live in a fantasy world, and whenever you try to pull them out of that fantasy world, they're going to be angry at you for it. If you act polite and cordial with people, the chances of the interaction being positive go up substantially. And this is not a guarantee, but I think it's something that's true more often than not. And it's true enough that I feel like that should be the resounding advice that people give, is that, you know, while, yeah, there are bad police officers that do bad things, and I think everybody doesn't like that, probably most of all other police officers. Does that make sense? Run from cops and get your ass beat? Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, right, is, like, basically, whenever I talk about it, I'm talking about, like, kind of like what is rather than, like, what should be. Because it's like you don't go outside wearing a raincoat because it's gonna rain tomorrow, you know? And that's kind of like my mindset on it, is like, yeah, I think that things should be different, but they're not different right now. So you should work with what you have and do what's best for you. Problem is they don't get enough training, don't pass psychological tests. Yeah, if it was up to me, I would do a lot of police reform. I think police reform is probably one of the most important things. The reason why I think police reform is so important is because the way that most people interface with the government, the only and main way that people interface with the government is through a police officer. If you have a bad interaction with the police officer, that's going to completely change your viewpoint on the government and society. So it's imperative, in my opinion, that those interactions are as low chance U.S. or maybe Postal Service, right? But I think people don't view it the same way. And you don't really interact with your mailman, you know? He just delivers the mail. Like, I don't even know my mailman's name. I never see him or talk to him or anything, right? A DMV? Yeah, maybe the DMV. But I think, like, police officers are I think we can both agree, right? Police officers are a huge point of contact between, they're a huge point of contact between, you know, the average citizen and the government. If that point of contact is compromised or it does not have integrity, people will view that as the worst thing about the government. You see what I'm saying? And they'll view the government as bad. And I think it's bad for people to dislike the government. I think it's good to have a healthy skepticism for the government and a healthy level of distrust, but I don't think that it's good for people to actively resent and distrust the government categorically. Agree with the government should be afraid of the people. I find it to be weird that people even draw a distinction between the two. The governments are the people. So like, for example, whenever I tell people that, you know, it's like the best thing to do is like, you know, be cordial and polite if you get pulled over by a police officer. And they're like, I tell people like, this is what's happened with me, right? I mean, you guys have seen pictures of like me whenever I was a kid, right? And like with my friends, like many of my friends are not white. You know, this isn't a race issue specifically. I think it's just general advice. And I feel like people have a tendency to just completely abandon common sense because they have just been fed like a, you know, a media cycle of just like terrible news. People haven't seen their own congressman but hate Congress. Think about that. Yeah, people generalize too much. It makes too much sense. Not a case everywhere, unfortunately, Russian government exists. Yeah, I think so. And government should respect their problem is they have to continue and earn respect. Yeah, sure. I think that it's just kind of common sense. Precedent to make conclusions, same time personal experience doesn't mean it's the same everywhere. No, I don't think so. Having conversations about this, I think, is very difficult because people, like whenever I say something about it, people don't hear what I say. They hear what they've been conditioned to hear. And I find that to be very, very, very bad. It's like, you know, they basically, as soon as they hear one thing they don't like, they strawman what you're saying into the way that they disagree with that point of view, if that makes sense. Boiled down to, of course, they think that he's white. Yeah, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of black people who have interactions with the police every day, and they don't get shot, and everything's fine. You don't hear about that on the news, but I think that's what happens. It's true. And I think that the chances of that happening are much higher if you comply and you're not belligerent. The group and take on ending qualified immunity, replacing internal affairs civilian board. I think there's a lot to, like, I wouldn't really say that because I don't, like, I understand the idea of it, but I've never heard an argument for why it really exists. So I'd want to hear why. It's one thing to have an opinion on something, right? But like, if I was actually trying to make that decision, I would not just make that decision willy-nilly, you know? Like, it's an important topic. It's very, like, I'd want to hear as much about it as I can. There's a higher chance for POC to be treated differently. I think that can be true, and also what I'm saying is true. Like, I think it can easily be true that, like, there's a higher chance of a minority to be treated badly by police, and it's still to be true that the best option is still to be compliant and to do what they ask you to do. Like, both of these things are true, in my mind. And that's what was frustrating me, I think, a little bit earlier, whenever we were talking about it, is because people were pretending like that's not what I said, you know? How can you avoid police brutality? You'll never avoid it. It'll always happen. I think it's impossible to get rid of it completely. But I think that there's a lot of ways to reduce it. You need gun law reform to go hand in hand with police reform? No, I don't really think so. I think that guns are obviously an issue, but I think that there's more to it than that. I think that the two problems, like, they're intertwined to a degree, but I don't think that one causes the other. Most police didn't have culture of covering for their coworkers, bad mistakes. I think that's just kind of what happens, and that's why you need to have accountability on other sides. Who should be trained for firearm before purchase? Well, I don't know. A lot more of accountability would be good. I think the real problem that people have with police officers is, I think it makes sense too, that what a lot of people are frustrated about is whenever a police officer does something bad and, you know, they ruin somebody's life and they just get reprimanded for it. It's kind of like the accountability isn't there. I think that's what the biggest issue with, like, police are. Establish accountability. One of the ways is probably to make sure that people that work together don't investigate each other. Now, I feel like that's probably just a recipe for disaster. And it's a recipe for people to take advantage of, you know, different systems and things like that, and just kind of, you know, cover for their friends or do something that makes sense for their friends, right? And I think that, you know, anytime that it's like, oh, we've investigated ourselves and we found that we did nothing wrong. Yeah, sure. Who established accountability? Well, I think that you do with the government, right? You do it through the government. And the way you do it really is you, it's a tier 2, right? I'm just gonna throw that one away. You enact laws and different types of like accountability measures to make it easier for people to report abuse and make it harder for that to be ignored. Like I actually don't think it's really like it's a difficult problem to solve, but I don't think it's impossible. I really don't. I think the problem is like nobody even goes about trying to solve the problem because they're too busy pointing fingers at each other of who's actually at fault and who's really wrong. The accountability is 100% the issue. It should be like malpractice insurance. You fuck up too much, you can't get insured, which equally means no job. I think there's a lot of things that they should do, and I think that would probably be one of them. Yeah, it's like if you have that happen and it just ruins somebody's fucking life, I think it absolutely should, you know, should be taken seriously. Telling Ms. Blackman to comply is minimizing the issue. It's not about minimizing the issue. It's about minimizing the chances of something bad happening. The thing is, like, I am not responsible for people to misinterpret what I say into something that I didn't say because they're emotionally invested in the topic. And that's not my problem. Yeah, that's not my problem. I'm not... nobody thinks that. Yeah, nobody thinks that. Nobody's saying that. You're just... You're jousting at windmills. When it took off, seems like police are being criminally charged now. Yeah, I mean, we saw it like a couple of times. I don't know. I think that there's also like a lot of... There's a lot of like minor infractions that happen where it's like a police officer is just like a huge asshole. And I think being a huge asshole, you're right, it's not as bad as killing somebody, but it's really bad. You shouldn't have any huge asshole police officers. Wouldn't have to be for abuse much. Should we train people better? People they need to take accountability if they don't make mistakes. Oh, no, it's... The thing is, like, it's not an either or. It's a situation where, like, you approach it... In my opinion, you approach it from, like, 10 different ways. You see what I'm saying? You don't just go and be like, oh, this is what we should do, and we do this, and it solves the problem. No, I think that you have to do a lot of things. So, like, 13-year-olds buy guns legally with private auctions without paperwork. I don't, like... I think that there's an argument to be made that it's just probably better for people that are over... Like, I think that if you are under the age of 21, you probably don't need a gun. I don't think so. Most people that are that age do not need a gun. And the thing is, like, with school shootings, for example, most school shootings happen from people that are under 21. They're teenagers. Eliminate qualified immunity, eliminate 90% of bad cops. Yeah, but I don't know if there's like a secondary, like, negative effect to that. Somebody needs an AR for defense. I think that it doesn't really matter what kinds of guns somebody has if they're not willing to use them to hurt people. Like, it of course matters, right? Because you put other people at risk, they can be stolen, etc. But I think that that's not really... That's not a position that I look at it from. Like, I don't see it that way. Debate is on. I think that Hassan and I generally agree on this. It's just that, like, I probably... Like, Hassan focuses on the part that I don't focus on, and I focus on the part that Hassan doesn't focus on. Does that make sense? So, like, I think he would agree with what I'm saying, and I would agree with what he's saying. It's just that, like, for him, it's like 90-10 one way, and for me, it's like 90-10 the other way. School shootings started the past 3 years, had rifle clubs in high school, kept guns at school, never had school shootings. Oh, whenever, yeah, in like the 60s. Yeah, no, I think it's like, I feel like a lot of people, like, don't even really, it's almost like they don't want to solve the problem. Obviously, like, I think people, I've said this before, right? I think somebody should be able to own, like, a rifle or a handgun for self-defense in their own home. I do believe in that. I think that's a good thing. And other things beyond that is, like, it's up for debate. And also, I think that there's another big factor where you have the media. I think the media does influence people like this, and the coverage of it does influence people like this. Now, is it the media's fault? No, I would not really say it's the media's fault that it happens. I think that's completely unfair. But I do think that it's come on, interrupt them. There you go, nice. I do think there's a factor there. It's like, for example, like one parallel I can give you is that the guy that shot up the Uvalde school, what he did before he shot up the school, and like everything about it, like it was pretty much like about the same as Sandy Hook. So isn't that a weird thing? Well, it's like I don't think it's a coincidence, right? I think it's the coverage of that probably worked as like some sort of inspiration, or that person took it into account whenever they did that. Talking about mass shooting contagion. Sure, I mean, you can call it whatever you want. I mean, I'm not really a big person into like, you know, the different like terms that people have or whatever, but I think that sure, yeah, like mass shooting contagion, like it's kind of a self-explanatory term. So like I'm like 99% sure I know what that is, even without having to like look into it. But yeah, I think that it's too much of it's too much of like one thing and not other things at the same time. Bad cops won't stop being bad unless they feel personally threatened. I think that bad cops, it's like there's a mixture, right? Like the unfortunate reality is being in any sort of authority position is an appealing prospect for people that should not be in authority positions. Like, for example, like there's a lot of people who like the idea of being able to tell people what to do. So like those people want to be in an authority position because they like being able to tell people what to do. But that's not really a good thing for somebody in an authority position to think. And I think that you have that happen with police officers sometimes too, right? Where you have somebody who's just an asshole and, you know, they're like, it's like my way or the highway type person. And it's like, yeah, this is a, God his ass. This is a bad thing. And so it's important to weed those people out and make sure they don't ruin it for everybody else.